Today's lesson is Build Your Own Memory Palace. Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
And I'm Helen.
And today we're going to talk about increasing your memory or improving your memory, especially when you're trying to learn things and you're going to take a test in the future. We have some sorts of games we can play, some kind of techniques or special skills that we can use in order to help us remember. And the technique that we're going to learn today is called the Memory Palace.
Yes, I think people today have lost some of their ability to memorize things or to remember things compared to people in the past, because with technology today, we don't need to memorize things. So I remember when I was a kid, I knew my friends and my family members' phone numbers. Who knows their friends and family members' phone numbers these days? The numbers are stored in their cell phones and their smartphones, and there's really no reason to memorize a telephone number, let alone other pieces of information that you can very readily have in your devices.
Right. So telephone numbers are one thing, but vocabulary lists and other things like that are another thing. And so if you need some help learning things and to memorize things and to remember them, we've got a technique called the Memory Palace. You're going to build your own memory palace. Let's find out what this is all about. Let's listen to the first part right now.
Build your own memory palace. Long ago, before computers came along, people had to store vast amounts of information in their minds. To help them memorize things, some people used a highly effective technique known as the memory palace.
大家好，第一部分我们来介绍片语 come along， 它指出现、开始存在或是问世。例如 A stranger came along just in time to help me with my flat tire. 有一位陌生人及时出现，帮助我处理爆胎的状况。又或者说 Before computers came along, offices were filled with typewriters instead. 在电脑问世之前，办公室里都是打字机。接下来我们来介绍形容词 vast， 它的意思是大量的、广大的或是巨大的。例如 Vast deserts cover most of the country's interior. 广大沙漠占据了该国大部分的内陆。又或者说 The national park covers a vast area of mountains, lakes, and forests. 那个国家公园涵盖广大的山脉、湖泊和森林区域。再来我们看到动词 memorize， 它的意思是记住或是熟记。例如 Yolanda spent hours memorizing her speech for the competition. Yolanda 花了好几个小时来记住她演讲比赛的讲稿。又或者说 Aaron must memorize a lot of information for science class. Aaron 在科学课上必须熟记很多资讯。
So today we're going to talk about memory palaces, and it's basically a technique for remembering and memorizing things. Now, long ago, before computers came along, people had to store vast amounts of information in their minds. So before computers came along means before computers arrived or appeared on the scene. Before computers were invented, people had no other choice but to store a lot of information in their minds. So vast amounts means a lot. Something that is vast is extremely large. Now, for the phrasal verb to come along, to appear or arrive, I could also say that when I'm at a restaurant and I made an order with the server might tell me, your order will come along any minute now. It'll be here in any minute.
Or if you go to a restaurant and you want to find your table, the waiter or waitress may say, oh, come along with me. I'll take you to your table. And in this case, we do need to store large amounts of information or even vast amounts of information. This is especially true if you're trying to learn a language like English or Chinese. There is so much stuff that you have to memorize. And yes, indeed, you need to store those huge amounts of information in your mind. And to help these people memorize things, some people used a highly effective technique known as the memory palace. Now, here we've got the word memorize. That just means to remember something so that you can recall it from memory later on. When I was in school, of course, we had to memorize poems. I think there was one time I had to memorize the Gettysburg Address by Abraham Lincoln. I think I remember some of it. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth onto this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. And I think I forgot the rest of it. But in any case, we had to memorize the Gettysburg Address for a history class or something like that.
Right. So to memorize means to commit to memory, to learn something so that you know it perfectly. In school, even today, teachers often expect us to memorize information, like vocabulary words. But more and more in school, we're not asked to memorize things anymore because we have computers and we are told to come up with original ideas. However, it's still good to memorize things because that way you train your mind to be strong and to store a lot of information.
So today we're going to introduce to you the concept of the memory palace. So let's get to it. Let's go on to the second part of our lesson. We'll listen to it first.
Developed around 2,500 years ago in Greece, a memory palace is a mental space for keeping information. Building one is simple. First, choose a familiar place, like your home or school, and visualize it. Next, plan a route for walking through that space in your mind. Lastly, take note of specific features, such as a sofa or a table along the way. To use your memory palace, attach an item you want to remember to one of the features. To illustrate, let's say you want to remember the word sibling for an English test. You could picture 4 brothers and sisters sitting on the sofa eating ice cream. Since the word's first syllable, si, sounds like 4 in Chinese, and its second syllable, bling, is similar to the Chinese word for ice cream, this image could help you recall the word's definition.
第二部分我们看到动词 visualize， 指的是使形象化、使视觉化或是使看得见。举例来说，Before designing her house, Monica visualized how it would look. Monica 在设计自己的房子之前，把它看起来的模样形象化。再举一个例子 ，Film directors often visualize a specific scene before shooting it. 电影导演在拍摄某个场景之前，通常会先让它视觉化。另外，去掉字尾 ize 就会变成形容词 visual， 它的意思是视觉的或是视力的。例如 If you like visual arts, you should visit this museum. 如果你喜欢视觉艺术，你应该参观这座博物馆。又或者说 The director is known for the visual style of his stage productions. 这名导演最出名的就是他舞台剧作的视觉风格。接下来我们看到名词 route， 也可以念作 route， 它的意思是路线、航线或是途径。例如The bridge is closed, so we'll have to take a different route home tonight. 这座桥封闭了，所以我们今晚必须走别条路线回家。又或者说 We decided to take the longer but nicer route through the woods. 我们决定走比较长但沿途风景比较美的路线，穿越森林。最后我们看到动词 recall， 意思是回想起或是回忆、记得。例如 Carol's style of dress recalls 60s fashion.Carol 的服装风格让人回想起60年代的时尚，或是 Helga couldn't recall where she had left her keys. Helga 想不起来她把钥匙放在哪里。
So we're describing the memory palace. Developed around 2,500 years ago in Greece, a memory palace is a mental space for keeping information. So a palace, as you know, is a place where kings and queens and nobles live. This is a memory palace, however, and this palace doesn't exist in the real world. It exists in your mind. So it's actually a mental space, a space that's in your mind, and this space can be used for keeping information.
Right, so building one is simple. You want to build a mental palace, and of course, you're going to build it in your mind, and that's a simple thing to do. First, choose a familiar place like your home or school and visualize it. So yes, imagine where you live, your home, or you could imagine your school, or maybe someone else's home, or maybe a castle somewhere. You just imagine it. And then you visualize it. If you visualize something, you try to create a picture in your mind what it would actually look like. You have this mental image of something. You imagine what the thing will look like.
Right. So the key is to choose a familiar place. And your home or your school should be familiar because you're there every day. You don't want to choose a place that you're not familiar with because then you won't be able to visualize it. When you visualize something, you form a picture of that thing in your mind. So, for instance, some of the greatest writers are able to describe people and things so well that readers are able to visualize them in their minds.
Right, so the next step is to plan a route for walking through that space in your mind. So you try to imagine this house of yours. So you come in the front door, and if you go to the right, it's the dining room. And then if you go through the dining room, then you're in the kitchen. And beyond the kitchen, of course, is the bathroom and then the living room, etc. So you memorize or plan a route for walking through that space in your mind. I guess you're supposed to determine the direction you're supposed to go through when you memorize things.
Yes, and a route is a way or a path that leads you from one place to another. So I could say, what is the shortest route from the office to the MRT station? So there are many ways to get from my office to the MRT station. There are 2 or 3 different paths I can take, but I want the shortest route or the shortest way to get there. Now, this word route can be pronounced 2 ways. You can either say route or route.
Right. When I was in junior high, of course, I had a paper route where you delivered newspapers to people's homes, usually after school every day. But here you're planning a route or a route for walking through the space, and you plan that in your mind. And lastly, this is the final step, take note of specific features such as a sofa or a table along the way. So as you follow this route and you go through various rooms, you try to take note of those specific features. If you take note of something, you observe it and then you remember it. So, of course, you're going to remember specific features like a sofa. There's a sofa in the living room, or there's a table in the kitchen, or there's a bookshelf in the library, or whatever. You try to visualize all these features along your route there.
Yes, so this is how you create a memory palace. But so far, you haven't started using that palace yet. To use your memory palace, attach an item you want to remember to one of the features. Now, remember, before we said that we should take note of specific features in this mental space. So it could be a sofa, a table, a bookshelf, or whichever you choose. In order to use your memory palace, you want to attach one item, one thing, to one of the features. So you can attach one thing to the bookshelf or to the table or to the sofa. To attach here means to fix, to put on something so that it stays there.
Yep, so you fix an item onto one of those features. You're going to attach it, and let's look at an example here to illustrate. Let's say you want to remember the word sibling for an English test. Okay, so of course, a lot of times when you're studying English, you need to memorize vocabulary. And to illustrate or to give you an example, the example we have here is the word sibling. You need to remember it for an English test. Okay, a sibling, of course, refers to your brother or sister. For example, I have 3 siblings, 2 older brothers, and 1 younger sister. Do you have any siblings, Helen?
I don't have any siblings. I'm an only child.
Okay, so yes, indeed, if you don't have any siblings, you are an only child. But if you do have brothers and sisters, then you have some siblings, and you need to remember the word sibling for an English test. Now, here's what you could do. You could picture 4 brothers and sisters sitting on the sofa eating ice cream. Okay, so we've got 4 siblings here, a combination of brothers and sisters, and they're sitting on the sofa and they are eating ice cream. That sounds pretty tasty. And since the word's first syllable, si, sounds like 4 in Chinese, and its second syllable, bling, is similar to the Chinese word for ice cream, this image could help you recall the word's definition. So again, sibling. Sibling, si, sounds like si in Chinese. And then the second syllable, bling, sounds like the Chinese word for ice cream. Bling, ling, bingqiling. And therefore, that could help you recall or remember the word's definition.
Yes, and we mentioned that the word sibling has an initial syllable that is si. Now, syllable here refers to a word or a part of a word that contains a single vowel sound. So the word syllable, for instance, itself contains 3 syllables because it's syllable. So that's what a syllable is. And this type of memory trick uses the sound of the word as well as images that you can create to help you remember the word. Because sibling means brothers and sisters, then you can picture in your mind sitting on a sofa in your memory palace 4 brothers and sisters, which is the meaning of siblings, and use the sound of the word to relate to the image. So these 4 brothers and sisters are eating ice cream, which is bingqiling or bling if you say it really quickly. Then bling would be the second syllable of the word sibling, and that helps you remember that sibling means brothers and sisters. It's really a matter of mixing sound and images and doing your own creation so that you can remember that word. There are no hard and fast rules to how to do this. It just has to be meaningful to you.
Right. You attach meanings to various objects in the palace there. The first example we gave you is of some siblings sitting on a sofa. You could use the image of books on a bookshelf or a cat sleeping on the carpet. Use your imagination. Let your imagination run wild, and you'll come up with various ways to remember things, not just for English tests, but maybe for mathematics or science or humanities or whatever. The idea is that you can recall the word's definition or you can recall that information. So to recall just means to remember something. I could say, well, I ran into an old friend from high school, but I couldn't recall his name. Was it Dave? Was it John? I just couldn't recall the name.
Yes, and sometimes I can't recall what I had for dinner the night before or 2 nights before. And that means I can't remember what I ate last night. And that is probably a problem, which means I need to sharpen my memory.
So this is one kind of technique you can use to help you memorize things. Let's move on now to the third and final portion of our lesson for today. Let's listen first.
With practice, information can be committed to memory for a long time using a memory palace. Just give it a try.
With practice, information can be committed to memory for a long time using a memory palace. So this type of thing requires practice. It's not going to work overnight. You need to practice how to build this mental space and putting specific features in that space and then attaching meaning to these features. So it all takes time, some practice, but if you go through the process of practicing, information can be committed to memory. When you commit something to memory, you are learning it so well that you know it by heart. So it's basically another word to say memorize. If you commit a poem to memory, it means that if your teacher asked you to recite the poem, to say it back to her or him, you would be able to do that immediately without thinking twice.
Yep, like I gave the example earlier of the Gettysburg Address, I committed that to memory for a history class back in junior high school. But in this case, you want to commit this information to memory and to have it there for a long time. And with practice, you can use the memory palace just for this purpose. Just give it a try. If you give something a try, that means you try something that you haven't done before. I want to go back to this term commit to. Here, of course, we're talking about committing something to memory, to memorize something. But to commit to something also means you're going to be dedicated to that thing. You're going to take it seriously, like you got a new job and you think it's a good opportunity. So you're going to commit to this job. You're going to take it seriously. You're really going to try to make it work.
That's right. So give it a try. Try using this memory palace. Perhaps it'll work for you and it'll help you do well on your next test. Or you can use this as a chance to research other types of memory devices and perhaps you can find the one that's right for you.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Here comes Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第一部分第二句写到 To help them memorize things, some people used a highly effective technique known as the memory palace. 为了帮助他们记住事情，有些人使用了一个非常有效的技巧，称为记忆宫殿。句子里面的这个 known as the memory palace 是用来修饰前方提到那个技巧，那它其实是由形容词子句简化而来的分词片语。好，那我们就来学习如何将形容词子句简化成分词片语。好，碰到主格关系代名词 who, which 或是 that 所引导的形容词子句时，第一个简化步骤就是先把关系代名词省略掉。那第二个步骤呢，是将动词改成分词 VING 或是 PP， 那就会形成分词片语了。好，动词是主动的时候，我们会用现在分词 VING， 被动的时候会用过去分词 PP。 好，我们就来造两个例句哦。第一个例句是 The man who is standing by the sports car is an actor. 站在跑车旁边的那名男子是个演员。我们句中的Who is standing by the sports car 是形容词子句用来修饰前方的 the man。 那这边的 who is standing 可以简化成 standing， 那就变成 The man standing by the sports car is an actor。 好，第二个例句是 They visited a castle which was built in the 16th century。 他们参观一座建于16世纪的城堡。句子里面这个 which was built in the 16th century 是形容词子句用来修饰前方的 a castle， 那这个 which was built 可以简化成 built， 那就变成 They visited a castle built in the 16th century。 好，那我们接着来介绍 be known as 的用法。 known 可以表达已知的、知名的，那么 be known as 是表达说以什么而为人所知，被称作什么什么，那通常是指以某个名称啊、身份什么而为人所知。所以呢 be known as 后面接的名词常常会是一个身份、职业、称号等等。举例来说 Paris is known as the city of light。 巴黎被称作光之城。好，那我们也补充两个相关的句型。第一个是 be known for， 它是表达以某个特色啊、特质或是成就而闻名，后面可以接名词或动名词。那我们先用 be known for 加名词来造句。 The town is known for its hot springs。 那个城镇以温泉闻名。好，那我们再用 be known for 加动名词来造句。 The actor is known for playing villains。 那个演员以饰演反派角色而闻名。好，那第二个句型是 be known to 加上原形动词，这是表达已知会做某事，以做某事出名。像 The king was known to be cruel， 大家都知道那位国王很残暴。Regular exercise is known to have many health benefits。 大家都知道规律运动有许多健康益处。好，那以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾这些单字吧。
Vast. Peter has traveled to a vast number of countries for his work. Memorize. Lily read the textbook chapter several times in order to memorize key points for her exam. Route. Our route to the park took us past the police station and the library. Illustrate. Playing the piano is easy, Nora said. To illustrate, she slowly tapped out a simple melody. Syllable. The word elephant has 3 syllables. Recall. Ryan was clearly struggling to recall the details of the conversation we had last week.
Discussion starter starts now!
Here's our discussion starter for today. The question is, can you think of another technique that people can use to help them memorize information? How does it work?
One trick I have used in the past to help me memorize things is to create a song around those things that I want to memorize. It works by turning words into lyrics, and if you sing those lyrics enough times, you naturally begin to remember them. And that way you can memorize what it is that you need to commit to memory.
Good technique. Well, one good method for memorizing information that I use is breaking things down into smaller parts, especially when trying to memorize Chinese characters, which can be difficult for foreigners. Let's take the character qin, for example, for fuqin or muqin. That character can be broken down into three parts: the part that means to stand, the part that means wood, and the part that means to see. So I can imagine a parent standing in a tree watching their kids play below. So that's one way you can memorize a Chinese character, and I use this technique for all sorts of different characters. Most of the time it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you enjoy reading along with us. I am Helen.
I am Roger.
See you next time.